Putting language assessment in this place. Language as evidence about people. It is a natural reaction to hearing or reading and fragments of language to use it. Evidence about the person who produced it. When we speak on the telephone to people whom we have not met, we may use the sound of their voice, its accent and pitch to give us clues about whether they are native speaker of our languages, which region they come from, their gender, age, social class, and profession, and their mood and attitude. It seems that we can help forming an option about people according to the kind of language they produce. In Britain, survey of customers of telephone call centers investigating attitude toward accent show that British people tend to the associated American accent with high level of success. Scottish accent with trustworthiness, and the accent of people who come from large cities such as London, Liverpool, and Birmingham with low level of both. The Yorkshire Post 2006, this attitude may be unreasonable, but we are more likely to listen to and believe messages delivered by voices that we find pleasing and trustworthy. Business know this and carefully choose actor with suitable accent to develop their advertising messages. If we receive a letter of email from someone, we base similar judgment on their choice of word and written style. We may even begin to form ideas about their appearance and personality. As you read this, you are probably already building up a picture in your mind of the writer of this book. When you do this kind of thing, you are using the language that a person produces to make inference or draw conclusion about them. Linguistic evidence can something be used quite formally to give insight into a person's identity or personality. Expert and forensic linguistics often try to establish where a suspect comes from by studying his or her accent of speech pattern. Sometimes, employer look the size and shape of job applicant handwriting because this is supposed to give insight into their personalities. However, this kind of inference about people, regional origins, or characteristics are not usually what is implied by the term language assessment. In this book, the focus is on assessment, where knowledge about language, the ability to use language, or skill applying this are measured or evaluated. In every life, we not only make judgment about people on the basis of how they use language, we also make judgment about the qualities of the language that they use. We notice when they make grammatical error or choosing an inappropriate word, when they appeared impolite or over formally, when they are very hesitant, when they are being unclear or imprecise, or on the other hand, when they seem to express their ideas particularly well. We also judge our own use of language. As we speak or write, we monitor and correct ourselves. We put right our slip of the tongue and fix our spelling mistake with or without the help of our word processing software. We rephrase the things we say it people misunderstanding us we recognize our right text to try to make our ideas clearer to our reader. The nature of the knowledge, skill, and abilities involved in learning and using a language is a matter of debate. An introduction to some of the continuous issues that have excited language assessment specialists is given in Part 3. Briefly, knowledge about language may include recognizing a word written in a foreign language and knowing translation. Equivalent word in English can be translated as Arabic in Chinese or Bojel in German, or knowing a grammatical rule. The past participle in English regular verb is formed by adding ed to the stem look, or knowing pragmatic convention. For example, in circumstance, how are you? Spoken by an acquaintance is likely to be intended as a conventional greeting. The anticipated response might be good you, rather than details of other feeling or of any medical condition. A distinction is often made in language education following Jaime's 1972 between knowledge of the rules governing language as a system and the ability to actually use language and rehearse interaction. Learners may know a good deal about a language but be unable to assess the words of phrase they know in the course of a conversation, or be unable to pronounce them accurately. Conversely, many people are able to communicate effectively in a wide range of situations with little or no implicit knowledge of the system of rule that govern the language they are using. Language skill involve drawing on language knowledge and the language ability in order to read, listen, write, speak, to interact with other, or to meditate between them. The evidence we have of a person using a language may be very limited. A few telephone conventions and a handful of email perhaps, but based on what we observe in this fun, for instance, we often make inference about their general knowledge of a language, their ability to use the language, and their skill in carrying out language-related tasks. We may hear them speak for just a few minutes, but reach conclusions such as Adele know more about Albanian than I do, or Bonita can get by Bengal. We see a few examples of the writing, and we make statements such as Caroline can write very polished business letters and Chinese or diagrams. It's really difficult to frame question and Danish. The major focus of this book will be on the use of language assessment in educational context. This setting for language assessment is unusual in some important ways. Firstly, languages teachers, unlike most of us, are actually expected to voice their judgment about other people. Language use and are generally rewarded rather than resented for pointing out and correcting errors. If you have worked as a language teacher, you will probably have experience during the natural course of any lesson of this deciding whether one of our students has produced accurate and appropriate language and perhaps putting right mistake they have made or asking them to try again. You have probably asked them to read or listen to a text in a foreign language and then ask them questions about it to check their understanding as I define language assessment in this book. Example can range from informal classroom activities to well-known national and international language texts. So here is a simple definition. Language assessment involves obtaining evidence to inform inference about a person's language-related knowledge, skill, or abilities. The evidence comes from the performance of the tasks that involve the use of language. The inferences are what we interpret the performance to mean based on our belief about the nature language and its role in the life of the person being assessed. The inference we make about assesses the term I will use in this book for the people being assessed are generally used to inform decision that can range in magnitude from whether it would be better for them to use another comma in a sentence or practice saying a certain again to whether they should be given a job or permitted to make their home in a certain country. In language education, teacher training programs tend to give assessment rather little attention. Assessment is often the topic of just a few sessions, apparently an issue of little direct concern to the teacher, perhaps better left to expert specialists. On the other hand, if sometimes seem to take an overriding importance in the lives of teacher and learners. Many children, if asked why they are learning a foreign language, would answer that they are doing it mainly to pass a public test. Often known as an examination, most language teachers spend a good deal of time assessing their students, and especially when the day of an important national examination is getting close. Many dedicate most of their classes to preparing their students to take this test. In this book, I argue that language assessment is inseparable from the teaching and learning of languages. This challenge the more traditional view in teacher education that assessment is a distinct activity, one that is marginal to the main business of the language teacher. In my view, teachers need to develop what is sometimes called assessment literacy, that not only need to understand something about how language assessments are made, score, and interpret the result of useful assessment themselves. Experience suggests that low level of assessment literacy can help to bad education decision to teaching and learning that are less effective than they could be. Assessment and testing. The traditional view that separated assessment from teaching may result from the identification of word assessment with the now-word activity of testing. A test is an event that is specially set up to elicit a performance usually within a predetermined time frame for the purpose of making judgment about a person's knowledge, skill, or abilities. In the course of a language test, the person being judged, the assessed, a test taker, testee, or candidate will respond to a proof, an essay title question asked by an interviewer, a set of choices on a test paper. The test taker response is judged or second according to a mark scheme. This is predetermined produced such as identifying and calculating the proportion of correct answer. 14 out of 20, counting number of error in a piece of writing, assigning point or mark to an essay to match description presented on a scale, etc. The outcome is a score, grade, which is then formally recorded. The formalities and ritual of formal testing and the penalties associated with failure can make them an intimidating experience for the test taker. For some commentators, assessment is distinct from testing because it covers a much broader cycle of activities in addition to the test event, which involve electing a performance as evidence of language abilities. These activities include deciding on the content of the test, scoring the performance, deciding on the meaning of score obtained, decision that the score are used to justify, such as choosing with student to admit onto a course or deciding whether to award certificate. In this view, the test is just one step in a sequence of events which together make up a cycle of assessment. From another point of view, the word testing and refer to this entire cycle of assessment event, but tests are understood to make up a relatively small set of control procedure among a much broader range of options. Assessment is more general term than testing and take in many different methods of obtaining and evaluating language data, including less formal produce with fewer control and restriction than tests. While it can be helpful to remind ourselves that assessment involves a whole cycle of interrelated activities, it is the second of these distinctions. The range of options for obtaining information that is more often made in discussion of language assessment, and so is the one used in this book. In contrast to test, other form of assessment may involve such activities as informal questioning in the class by teacher, semi-formal exercises and quizzes carried out in class, learners reflecting on their own use of language self-assessment, learners judging each other performance peer assessment, the collection of sample of language that have not been elected according to any fixed formal plan. Example of these include observation and some form of portfolio assessment. Observation involves teachers watching and recording student performance in classroom activities. portfolio are collection of student work that many showcase their best achievement or represent progress over a period of time. Other approaches to assessment that do like tests involve is specific from classroom exercise of the kind found in most textbook may not be carried out under control condition such as set time, constraint, or curbs. On discussing answer with poly student score may not be formally recorded as evidence of the student abilities. In fact, reporting does not need to involve the awarded grade or scores at all, but may, for example, involve highlighting error or giving descriptive commentaries on performance. It is important to understand that tests are not the only means of judging learning language knowledge, skill, and abilities, and that not all language assessment are formal produced that led to score or grades. On the contrary, most language assessment are informal and obtrusive, involve no special arrangement, and do not cause particular anxiety or fear in the people who are being assessed. Assessment, teaching, and learning. There are a number of different strategies we can use when we learn a new skill from another person. Perhaps the simplest of this is imitation. One person, the learner, what another person does and then attempt in for him or herself. When animal learn skill, this generally appear to be how they do it. We know that some chimpanzee, for example, can learn now to carry out quiet, sophisticated tasks such as using a stick as a tool to catch insects by copying the action of other members of group. They carefully observe what the skilled chimpanzee does, recognizing that one set of action such as shaping a stick is related to another forking the stick into a tree trunk, and that this action together bring a reward, a meal of insect. They try to recreate the same series of action themselves to get the same reward. Chimpanzees are very good in imitation, and they often perform better than humans in carrying out intricate imitation tasks. Assessment of this kind of learning can be straightforward, combining imitation with a process of trial and error. Learners either succeed in accomplishing the task of repeatedly failed and eventually give up. All truth is possible to build knowledge by observing and copying. Imitation alone is a limited way of passing on a skill, and the more complex the skill, the less effective imitation seems to be. A child can watch adult driving a car and try to copy movement she sees, but that will probably not make her a safe and effective driver. When she has the chance to take the wheel when learning a language, I can try to imitate the sound that speaker of that language make to memorize word and grammatical pattern, but that is not likely to be enough to enable me to communicate effectively. Learning complex skill like this is much more effective if we understand something about why people perform certain actions and how those actions help them to accomplish the task they want to carry out. This level of understanding is easier to achieve if we have another person to teach us. In order to teach, people need both understand that others can do what they themselves can do and to be motivated to pass on their our own knowledge. When a person has mastered a new skill, they often share their newfound ability not only by showing, inviting others to watch as they perform the skill or telling, explaining to the learner how to do it, but also by attending to the learner and judging how well they have understood and and now close they are to being able to carry out the task independently. Human learners do not usually simply imitate their teacher but actively try to make sense of what they are learning, not only to notice that carry out a sequence of action leads to a particular outcome, but to understand why those so the teacher can support the learner by observing the learner effort and providing feedback, pointing out what they are doing well and what they are doing poorly in order to help them to improve. As human, our willing to teach each other in this way is one reason why we are so much more efficient than animals in perceiving and developing our collective knowledge and technologies. Understanding the gap between what learner can do now and what they need to be able to do or understand in order to fulfill tasks successfully required a sophisticated awareness both of the task and the learner. In the case of language learning, learners need to build an understanding of how people can use language to accomplish tasks such as establishing a rapport with another person, buying clothes, or getting their our cut. Assessment that take account of this required more than simple judgment of success or failure, as well as having a good mastery of the skill herself and the ability to model the skill in ways that make it more accessible to the learner. The good teacher breaks down complex skill into the different elements that contribute to success. The teacher recognizes which of these the learner are able to do independently, which they can do with some help or prompting, and which remain well beyond their abilities. The teacher may allow learner to carry out part of a task that they are already to able to accomplish, but often help with more challenging stages. Think of how a mother might help a child to assemble a model or a cook a meal, letting the child carry out tasks but asking questions, pointing out mistake, perhaps actually carrying out some of the most complex steps in the process herself before asking the child to try to replicate what she has done, giving feedback at the same time on what the child is doing well and how he might do better. Another way in which people learn new skill is through working together to solve problems. By acting as a team, people can do things that no individual member could do with acting alone. Think of them of engineer or medical researcher developing innovative machinery or now treatment. The member of the group create new form of knowledge by participating together in activities, and the relationship between them can be very important to the kind of learning that will occur. This kind of collecting social learning can be challenging to assess, especially when using traditional tests, grade, and scores, because it is difficult to establish what contribute each group member has made to the outcome in order to achieve better outcomes. The member of the group may need to come to understand for themselves what aspect of the activity they might be able to carry out in different ways to achieve better results, because assessment is used for a wide variety of purpose. It is a quiet, easy to concept of assessment taking place without teaching. One reason why many learners don't like public tests is that the test providers do not often give them any advice on which question they answer correctly or incorrectly. The test teachers them nothing. On the other hand, it is almost impossible to imagine any form of teaching that does not involve assessment, even in the most traditional classroom. Based on a tradition model of teaching, which assume that learning is mainly on wholly dependent on the teacher telling a group of students new information. The content of the lecture is intended to fill a gap between what the students are believed to know already and what they need to know in order to succeed. To be really effective as teacher, we need to find effective ways of assessing learners. We need to use what we learn from assessment to decide on action to take that will help learner, from assessment to decide on action to take that will learner to improve their knowledge of the language or their skill in using it. A major challenge for language educator is that process of learning a second language is still rather poorly understood. Second language acquisition SLA researcher who investigate them process disagree about fundamental mechanism of language learning and number of computing theories can be found. See Cook 2008, Light Brown, and Spider 2012, Mitchell et al. 2012. In assessing learner, we need to be clear about how we believe language are learned, what kind of evidence we might be able to collect to show us what learners know about a language, what they are able to use the language to do, what they have difficulty with, and how we can help them to expand the abilities. Another troublesome issue in assessing language learning is the extended of disagreement about the purpose for learning language. For some, language should be taught in school as a necessary basic skill. Just as we need to learn arithmetic in order to operate in the modern world, shopping using banking service, checking our tax, so we need foreign language to do business and to interact with people from other countries. There are said to be economic benefits for countries with a linguistically adaptable labor force. For others, the primary benefit of learning has more to do with what Cook 2008 described as brain training languages help us to develop our intelligence or adopt more flexible ways of thinking. Traditionally, a major process of learning language was personal development, taught the understanding of classic work of literature, so becoming more culture what we choose to assess. Will our course reflect what we think are the key purposes for language learning? People generally tend to believe that language assessment give them pertinent information that can help them to make good decisions. If they are right, assessment may be useful tools that improve teaching and learning and serve society more generally. On the other hand, a lack of assessment information for information from, from badly conceived assessment or poorly understood information from well conceived assessment may lead to regrettable decision. Teaching and learning will suffer evil. People will be denied opportunities and society will experience the negative effect. It is very important that we carry out language assessment as well as we can and use the result in a well-informed manner.